My name is Phil Pugsley, and alongside others, I started Amigos. I need to go back to my childhood really, because I was born in a Christian family that very much cared about people, was generous, and with a very practical faith. That followed me through my teens and into our marriage. I married Anne, and we wanted to have a practical faith which cared for people and was also generous in the way that we could help people in their lives. It wasn't until my early 40s that I had the opportunity to go to Tanzania. It was with two other guys, and we went to a place called Mwanza. Now this was a shock. It was the opportunity perhaps to learn about a different culture and see real abject poverty and deprivation. So after 2 weeks being there, we came back, and we joked about setting up like a charity called Amigos, because there was three of us, the three Amigos. It wasn't until 2 years later, after a few false starts, that one of the guys, Jeremy, decided to go back. But he was going through Uganda this time, and my wife had the opportunity to go with him, with some others. And on the way back out of Mwanza, Tanzania, they stumbled upon an orphanage of 80 kids. And this was pretty awful stuff. We would keep animals in far better condition than these kids were in. Sleeping on a dusty floor, having one meal a day, or sometimes no meal. In a very, very basic shack, really. On I'm coming back and saying we need to do something, I got up in church one Sunday morning and said, right, if 5 people gave £1, we could, over a month, feed these kids. So that's what we started doing. We started feeding these kids, and that grew, and we bought them beds and mattresses, and we wired this place for light, and then we could employ teachers to help them gain schooling. But after 4 or 5 years, I think with much research and understanding, orphanages are very much a European model that was imported into Uganda. You've got to remember at that time, it was the most devastating period of HIV/AIDS. Roughly 3,000 people a day, parents, were dying of AIDS, leaving millions of children behind. So, you had the biggest problem of orphaned children in the world, really, in sub-Saharan Africa. So we started thinking, and actually, Africa has a different model, and it's usually a family model. They have family, they have tribes, they have clans, and that usually captures these unaccompanied children, or orphans as we call them. But the nets are broken completely. You've got the average Ugandan lady having between 5 and 6 kids. So you can imagine that once an extended family could be massive. Many 12, 20 kids could be in an extended family due to parents dying, brothers, sisters. And then you had like grandparents, which are now trying to care for kids. So it was a massive problem. So after spending more time in Uganda and understanding some of the underlying problems, we realized that orphanage wasn't a great model. So we looked at child sponsorship. And this was the opportunity where we could help caregivers with school fees, which changed the situation dramatically. So we gradually slid out of the orphanage model and into child sponsorship, which grew, and people were coming on board, and that was the sort of basis of Amigos, really, until we learned that secondary schooling was the real problem. Most children could just about struggle through primary, but there was no way they were going to get into secondary. Less than 20% of the population were able to go to secondary school. Bearing in mind that the average age at that time was 15, that was a massive proportion of the population. I met with an old school friend, and he introduced me to a Ugandan called Patrick Okomwe. Now Patrick at the time worked for Uganda prisons. Now, Uganda prisons has quite a different model to our prisons. Idi Amin set up farms all over Uganda, and Patrick was head of poultry. So he had a real understanding of farming within Uganda. And we landed on this idea of developing a farm which would be in some ways supportive in terms of feeding, but also would be vocational. So Patrick was tasked with the job of finding some land so we could purchase to develop this vocational training centre. And he found 22 acres, and that was the beginning. It took us a few years to raise the funds to gradually build this. The foundation was farming, because 80% of Ugandans are subsistence farmers. That's in comparison to the UK, which is about 1%. I was pretty rubbish at school, but I was quite good with my hands. I used to come top in art and woodwork, and probably that, I don't think Amigos would have happened unless I'd come from that background and been given the opportunity to get eventually into print after working with my dad for 10 years in a corner shop. So I think it's great that we can give people an opportunity, because everybody's good at something. So that was the idea, and Kira Farm was born. We gradually built it, developed it, and we had our first intake of young ladies actually as guinea pigs, really, to see if we could do this. Remarkably, at that time, there was an initiative called Farming God's Way, which had grown out of Zimbabwe and did their first seminar in Uganda. I managed to get over there and took all the people that were involved now with Amigos, and we went through this training of conservation farming, which totally revolutionized our thinking. We were now equipped to double people's crop yields with very simple conservation techniques, and that's what we started teaching at that time. So as Kira Farm developed, we saw the opportunity to extend into the North Uganda. The North Uganda had 30 years of rebel activity. There was something called the LRA, and they were a terrible bunch that stole about 30,000 children and armed them with AK-47s. And they were destabilizing the north of Uganda and southern Sudan. Now, at this time, we were helping many of these ex-child soldiers or kids that have been into IDP camps. IDP camps are internally displaced people camps, like refugee camps, but they were in the country and they were being protected by the Ugandan army. The problem was that more people died in an IDP camp than at the hands of the LRA, the Lord's Resistance Army. Cholera, AIDS spread hugely, typhoid, just hunger and lawlessness, really, in these IDP camps. So we had a lot of very damaged young people come to Kira Farm in the early days. But as the war depleted, as the rebels depleted, we decided that it was an opportunity to go north and set up community development. And that was the sort of three areas that we were working in: child sponsorship, Kira Farm Development Centre with vocational training for young people, and community development. And this tool, this amazing conservation farming tool, was the foundation of our teaching into communities, helping communities to double their crop. Uganda's a unique place where it's on the equator, so it's pretty well 25 degrees all year round. No winter, no spring, no summer, no autumn. It gets dark at 7 o'clock every night. It gets light at 7 o'clock every morning. There are occasions of rain twice a year, and this is where the opportunity is to grow 2 crops a year. So you can imagine that doubling 2 crops did an amazing job for people in abject poverty to have some funds which they were able to send their kids to school. They were able to pay medical bills, and they were able to eat better in that way. The way we operated was that we would sponsor children for a limited time from the people in the community development that were going through training. This gave them the opportunity to be self-sufficient rather than reliant on child sponsorship for many, many years. We researched what was needed in the local community, and clearly, as well as farming skills, it was water. So we started putting in boreholes. I think probably to date we've probably given water to roughly 150,000 people in northern Uganda. As well as that, we decided to work with the church more closely, and for them to use this farming method, this conservation farming method, to help them deliver it into the communities. And they would choose the Kira trainees out of their community. And the purpose would be that they would go back after a year of having intense training at Kira Farm to make some real changes in their community. So just at the sort of end of my time at Amigos, we were able to address one of Uganda's biggest problems, and that's tree deforestation. Predictions are that there won't be a tree left by year 2050, but with coupling with other charities, we've managed now to start a whole tree planting program, and to date we've planted over 3 million trees, and we'll continue that for many years to come. So I guess what inspired my wife and I, Anne, to begin Amigos would be a heart to do something practical. It's a bit cliche, but what can we do to change the world? How can we use some of our resources and finances and heart to make a difference in other people's lives? Some of the lessons I've learned, there's a great saying, and it says, only a spider can repair its own web. And I think that's been very much in our heart, that Ugandans need to change Uganda, not us from outside. We are facilitators, so we have some resources that we can help with, and that's an important part of Amigos. And the other thing that really has helped me along the way, it's a quote by a guy called Ned Hay, and it says, almost anything can be achieved if you don't mind who takes the credit. I would like to just say that I want to give the credit to God, and I appreciate all our supporters over the years. You've made a massive, you've changed thousands of lives. Honestly, thousands will never be the same as a result. Thank you.